Still single, Amanda? At 35? My goodness, you must be desperate by now. That's how my mother greeted me last Christmas. Not Merry Christmas. Not, I'm so glad you're here. Not even a simple hello. Just an immediate reminder that I was 35 years old and still unmarried, still childless, still failing to live up to her expectations of what a successful daughter should be. She said it loud enough for everyone in the living room to hear. My father, my sister Jessica and her perfect husband Michael, their 3 photogenic children, my Aunt Carol, my Uncle Dave, and about a dozen other family members who'd gathered at my parents' house in Greenwich, Connecticut for Christmas Eve dinner. 15 people heard her greet her eldest daughter with mockery and judgment instead of love. I stood there in the doorway, still wearing my coat, holding the expensive bottle of wine I'd brought as a hostess gift, and I felt every eye in that room turn toward me. Some people looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and suddenly finding their drinks very interesting. Others looked curious, even entertained, waiting to see how I'd respond. My sister Jessica smirked into her champagne glass, clearly enjoying my discomfort, like she'd enjoyed it for years. Merry Christmas to you too. Mom, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to let her see how much her words hurt, even though I'd been hearing variations of them for a decade. Don't be sensitive, dear. I'm just concerned about you. All your friends are married. Your sister has been married for 10 years. Even your cousin Emily just got engaged, and she's 8 years younger than you. At some point, you have to face reality. You're running out of time. Your biological clock is ticking. Soon you'll be too old to have children, and then what? You'll end up alone with cats, dying in your apartment with no one to find you for weeks. She said this while taking the wine bottle from my hands and examining the label with a critical eye, holding it up to the light, as if evaluating whether my gift was worthy of her wine rack. This is nice, I suppose. Not as nice as the Dom Perignon that Jessica and Michael brought. That must have cost $300 a bottle. But I'm sure it's adequate for what you could afford. You probably couldn't afford the really good champagne on your salary anyway. Publishing doesn't pay well, does it? Not like Michael's finance job. That was last Christmas, December 24th, 2023. The most recent in a long line of humiliating holiday gatherings where my mother made sure everyone knew that I was the disappointing daughter. The one who hadn't married, hadn't produced grandchildren, hadn't lived up to the vision she'd had for my life since I was born. But this Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2024, everything was going to be different. Because this year, I wasn't walking into my parents' house alone. This year I had someone with me, someone my mother could never belittle, never dismiss, never use as evidence of my failure. Someone so accomplished, so impressive, so successful, that even my hypercritical mother would have to acknowledge that I'd done well. This year, I was bringing Dr. James Harrison, and my mother was about to discover that her constant mockery had finally pushed me to do something about it. Let me back up and tell you the whole story, because the context matters. Because you need to understand exactly how we got here, how 36 years of being the disappointing daughter led to this moment. My name is Amanda Catherine Sterling. I'm 36 years old now. I had a birthday in August that my mother forgot to acknowledge until 3 days later when Jessica reminded her. I'm a senior editor at a major publishing house in New York City called Whitmore & Associates. I work with best-selling authors. I help shape books that millions of people read, and I make approximately $150,000 a year doing work I genuinely love. I live in a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in the West Village in Manhattan. It's a 4th-floor walk-up in a pre-war building with exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, and huge windows that flood the space with natural light. I've decorated it carefully over the years, bookshelves lining every wall, filled with first editions and advance copies and books I've edited. Artwork from local galleries, plants that somehow I've managed to keep alive, a vintage velvet couch I found at an estate sale. It's small by suburban standards, only 650 square feet, but it's mine and it's perfect. I have amazing friends. Nicole, who I've known since college, works in marketing and is the most loyal person I've ever met. Sophia, who I met through work, is a literary agent with impeccable taste in restaurants and wine. Rachel, my neighbor from 2 floors down, is a high school teacher who always has the most fascinating stories about her students. We have dinner together once a week, rotating who hosts. We take weekend trips to the Hudson Valley to visit wineries. We text constantly throughout the day, sharing memes and complaints and celebrations. I have a fulfilling career that challenges me and excites me every single day. Last year, I edited a debut novel that became a surprise bestseller and sold film rights to Netflix. I worked with a Pulitzer Prize-winning author on her memoir. I discovered a talented writer at a conference and championed his manuscript until we published it to critical acclaim. I get to shape stories, work with creative people, and help bring books into the world. It's meaningful work that I'm genuinely proud of. I travel regularly. Paris last spring for a book fair where I spent 5 days eating croissants and visiting museums and negotiating international rights. Tokyo in the fall for a literary festival where I met Japanese authors and tried every type of sushi imaginable. Barcelona planned for next summer with Nicole and Sophia. I go to theater openings on Broadway. I saw 6 shows last year. I attend gallery exhibitions in Chelsea. I have season tickets to the Metropolitan Opera, and I actually use them, even going alone sometimes when my friends are busy, because I love opera and I'm comfortable doing things by myself. I volunteer at a literacy nonprofit every other Saturday, helping adults learn to read. One of my students, a 58-year-old woman named Maria, just finished reading her first complete book, a romance novel she picked out herself, and cried when she turned the final page. That moment meant more to me than most of my professional accomplishments. I have a good life. A full life. A life I'm genuinely proud of and grateful for every single day. But according to my mother, Catherine Ann Sterling, none of that matters. Not the career, not the meaningful work, not the friends or the travel or the rich, full life I've built. None of it counts because I'm not married, because I don't have children, because at 36 years old, I'm still single, and in my mother's worldview, that makes me a failure regardless of anything else I've accomplished. My mother is 62 years old and has spent her entire adult life defining herself and other women exclusively by their relationships to men and their ability to produce children. She married my father, Robert Sterling, when she was 22 years old, right after graduating from Vassar with a degree in art history that she never used. She had Jessica at 24 and me at 26. She was a stay-at-home mother who dedicated herself entirely to raising her daughters and supporting her husband's career as a corporate executive at a pharmaceutical company. She never worked outside the home after having children, never pursued her own career or interests beyond motherhood, never developed an identity beyond being Mrs. Robert Sterling and mother to Jessica and Amanda. Her entire life revolved around her family, and she built her entire sense of self-worth around having succeeded at the traditional milestones she was raised to value. Getting married young to a successful man, having children, maintaining a beautiful home, supporting a husband's career, raising daughters who would repeat the same pattern, and she judges other women, especially her own daughters, by those same rigid standards. My sister Jessica followed the prescribed path perfectly, like she'd been given an instruction manual at birth and followed it to the letter. She met Michael Davidson when she was 22, in her senior year at Boston College. He was getting his MBA, already lined up for a position at a prestigious investment bank. They were both attractive, ambitious in the acceptable ways, and from similar upper-middle-class backgrounds. They got engaged 6 months later in a proposal at a fancy restaurant that Jessica posted about extensively on social media, married at 23 in a wedding that cost $80,000 and had 250 guests. Bought a house in the suburbs of Connecticut by 24, with significant help from both sets of parents for the down payment. Had their first child at 25, a boy named Ryan. Second child at 27, a girl named Emma. Third child at 30, another boy named Jack. Now they live in a 5-bedroom colonial in Darien, Connecticut, with a white picket fence, professionally landscaped yard, a golden retriever named Buddy, and a minivan in the driveway. The house is always perfectly clean. The children are always well-dressed, and Jessica's Instagram feed looks like a J.Crew catalog come to life. Michael is a finance executive who makes about $400,000 a year, maybe more with bonuses. Jessica is a stay-at-home mother who spends her time shuttling the kids to soccer and dance and piano lessons, volunteering at their private school, serving on the PTA board, organizing elaborate birthday parties, and maintaining their picture-perfect home and life. They look like something out of a magazine. Attractive, successful, living the suburban dream that American culture tells us we're all supposed to want, and my mother has spent the last 13 years holding Jessica up as the gold standard of female achievement while using me as the cautionary tale of what happens when a woman focuses on her career instead of finding a husband and starting a family. Jessica understood what really matters in life. My mother has said countless times, usually within my hearing, often at family gatherings with witnesses. She found a good man, got married, had beautiful children. She has a real family, a real life. That's what women are meant to do. Create families, raise children, support their husbands. Jessica gets it. She understands what fulfillment actually looks like. And then she'd look at me with this expression of disappointment mixed with pity, shaking her head slightly like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Amanda chose her career instead. She's too focused on work, too independent, too picky about men. She thinks her job at a publishing house is more important than having a family. And now look at her. 36 years old with no husband, no children, no family of her own. Just a job and an empty apartment and a cat she probably talks to. What a waste of potential. For the record, I don't even have a cat. But my mother has decided that's my destiny. The crazy cat lady who dies alone. So she references it constantly as if it's already happened. Never mind that I love my job. Never mind that I've won awards for my editorial work. I was named one of Publishers Weekly's Editors to Watch 2 years ago. Never mind that authors specifically request to work with me. Never mind that I've helped shepherd multiple books onto the New York Times bestseller list. Never mind that I find genuine meaning and purpose in my work. None of that matters to my mother because I don't have a husband and children. This dynamic has played out at every single family gathering for the past decade, but it's especially intense at Christmas. Christmas is my mother's favorite holiday, the one she's most invested in, the one where she gets to perform her vision of perfect family life for an audience. She starts decorating the house in early November. She spends weeks planning the menu, testing recipes, making lists. She sends formal invitations to Christmas Eve dinner, even though it's the same people every year, and everyone knows they're expected to attend. She buys elaborate decorations and arranges them meticulously throughout the house. She coordinates outfits with Jessica, so they'll look coordinated in family photos. She hires a photographer to document the evening. It's her time to shine, to show everyone what a perfect family she's created, what a perfect life she's built. And it's her time to highlight how successful Jessica is and how much of a disappointment I am. Every Christmas for the past 10 years has followed the same painful pattern. I arrive at my parents' house, usually alone because I've been single for most of that time, though occasionally I'd bring a boyfriend who inevitably wouldn't measure up to my mother's impossible standards. She greets me with a comment about my single status or my age or my biological clock. Throughout the evening, she makes constant comparisons between Jessica and me, always to my detriment, always in front of witnesses. Jessica, tell everyone about Emily's dance recital. She was so beautiful on that stage, such natural grace. I have 73 photos on my phone, let me show you. Amanda, wouldn't you love to have children? To experience those precious moments? To have someone call you mommy? Oh, but I suppose you're too busy with work. Career women always miss out on what really matters. You'll regret it someday when you're old and alone with no one to take care of you. Michael just got another promotion. Isn't that wonderful? They're doing so well financially. They're looking at vacation homes in the Hamptons now. Can you imagine? A vacation home at 35? Jessica is so lucky to have such a successful husband who takes care of her so well. Amanda, are you dating anyone? No, still? Well, you really should make more of an effort. You're not getting any younger. Pretty soon you'll be too old to have children at all. And then what kind of man will want you? Look at this beautiful family photo of Jessica and Michael and the children. Aren't they gorgeous? I have it framed in every room of the house. This is what life is supposed to look like. A happy family. Amanda, when are you going to give me a photo like this? When are you going to stop being so selfish and think about starting a family? You're 36 years old. Time is running out. You're going to end up alone and bitter. One of those women who dedicated her life to her career and woke up at 50 realizing she'd missed out on everything that matters. Every single Christmas. The same comments, the same comparisons, the same message delivered with slight variations. Jessica succeeded at life, and I failed. The family members who attend these gatherings have learned to just accept this dynamic. Some look uncomfortable when my mother launches into one of her comparison speeches, but nobody intervenes. Nobody says, "Catherine, that's inappropriate." Nobody defends me. They just sit there and let it happen, year after year, because confronting my mother would be uncomfortable, and it's easier to just let her have her opinions and let me absorb the damage. My father is perhaps the most frustrating in his silence. He's not a cruel man. He's actually quite kind in his own quiet way. But he's also completely conflict-averse and has spent 40 years letting my mother control the emotional temperature of the family without pushing back. When she criticizes me, he looks uncomfortable but says nothing. When she praises Jessica excessively, he nods along. When I've tried to talk to him privately about how hurtful Mom's behavior is, he says things like, "You know how your mother is," and "She just wants you to be happy," and "Try not to take it personally." But how can I not take it personally when she's literally criticizing me personally? In front of everyone, constantly, last Christmas was particularly brutal, even by my mother's standards. I'd arrived alone because I'd been single for about 8 months at that point, having broken up with a guy named David who I'd dated for a year. David was a high school English teacher, passionate about literature, kind, funny, down to earth. We'd had a good relationship for a while, but ultimately he wanted to get married and have kids soon, and I wasn't ready for that level of commitment with him. I'd liked him, but I hadn't loved him enough to build a life with him. So I'd ended it, which was the mature and honest thing to do, even though it was painful. My mother's greeting. "Still single, Amanda?" At 35? My goodness, you must be desperate by now. Set the tone for the entire evening. During the cocktail hour before dinner, while people were mingling and drinking champagne and eating the elaborate appetizers my mother had prepared, she cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my wine glass. "Amanda, I've been thinking about your situation. Have you considered freezing your eggs? I read an article about it. Women your age who haven't found a husband yet are freezing their eggs so they'll still be able to have children later when they finally settle down. It's expensive, but it might be worth it given how quickly your fertility is declining. You're 35. Your eggs are aging. Soon it'll be too late." "Mom, I'm not having this conversation. Don't be defensive. I'm trying to help you. I'm concerned about your future. Do you realize that by the time you're 40, your chances of having a healthy baby drop dramatically? And you're not even dating anyone right now. So who knows when you'll actually find someone willing to marry you? You need to start thinking practically about these things. I'm not freezing my eggs, and I'm not discussing my reproductive choices with you at a Christmas party. Fine, be stubborn, but don't come crying to me in 10 years when you're desperate for a baby and it's too late. I tried to warn you." During dinner, which seated 18 people around the extended dining room table, my mother asked loudly from her position at the head of the table whether I'd tried dating apps or if I was too proud for that. Because I was reading that many women your age find husbands through dating apps now. It's not like when I was young. You can't just meet someone at a party or through friends anymore. You have to be proactive. Have you tried Tinder? Or that one for professionals, what's it called? The League? You should try those. You need to put yourself out there because men aren't just going to appear out of nowhere. I've tried dating apps, Mom. That's how I met my last 3 boyfriends. And those relationships didn't work out, so obviously you're not choosing well. Maybe you need to lower your standards. You can't afford to be picky at your age, Amanda. You need to be realistic about what kind of man will be interested in a 35-year-old woman with no husband and no children. Your options are limited. You might need to settle for someone who's just adequate, rather than waiting for some perfect fantasy man who doesn't exist. Jessica, sitting across from me, looked down at her plate, but I could see the small smile playing at her lips. She loved these moments, loved being held up as the success while I was positioned as the failure, loved being the favorite, the one who'd done everything right. Michael, her husband, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. He never said anything when my mother got like this. None of them did. My Aunt Carol finally intervened, changing the subject to ask about the kids' school, and the conversation mercifully moved on. But the damage was done. Everyone at that table had heard my mother tell me I needed to lower my standards and settle for adequate, because I was too old and undesirable to expect anyone good. During dessert, 3 kinds of pie and homemade cookies and a Yule log cake my mother had. Spent 2 days making. She suggested maybe I should see a therapist to figure out why I was so resistant to marriage and family. Because it's not normal, Amanda. Most women your age desperately want to get married and have children. The fact that you don't seem to want those things suggests there's something wrong. Maybe you have commitment issues. Maybe you had some trauma you haven't processed. Maybe you should talk to someone professional about why you're sabotaging your own happiness. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm living my life according to my own values and timeline. Your timeline? Amanda, you're 35 years old. You don't have time for a timeline. You need to get married and have children soon, or it's going to be too late. This isn't a career where you can just keep climbing the ladder at your own pace. Biology has a timeline, and you're running out of time. I left that Christmas gathering feeling humiliated, angry, and exhausted. I drove back to Manhattan alone, hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, tears streaming down my face, frustrated with myself for still caring what my mother thought, still seeking her approval, still showing up to these gatherings where I was consistently made to feel inadequate and worthless. I called my best friend Nicole from my apartment that night, crying and ranting about my mother's behavior, pacing back and forth across my small living room while Nicole listened patiently on the other end of the phone. "Why do I keep going back?" I asked her, my voice breaking. "Why do I subject myself to this every year? She's never going to approve of me. She's never going to see my life as valuable because I don't have a husband and kids. She's never going to change. So why do I keep showing up and letting her hurt me? So stop going," Nicole said simply, with the straightforward logic that was one of the things I loved most about her. "Stop showing up to events where people treat you badly. You're 35 years old, Amanda. You don't need your mother's approval to live your life. You don't need her validation. You don't owe her access to you if she's going to use that access to tear you down. But she's my mother. It's Christmas. It's a major family holiday. I can't just not show up. What would I even say? Sorry, I'm not coming because you're mean to me? That sounds so childish." It's not childish to set boundaries with people who hurt you, even if they're family. Especially if they're family. You've told her how her comments make you feel, right? Many times. She always says she's just concerned about me, that she's trying to help, that I'm being too sensitive. Then she knows she's hurting you, and she's choosing to keep doing it. That's not concern, Amanda. That's cruelty. You have every right to protect yourself from that. I know you're right. Some part of me keeps hoping she'll change, keeps hoping that one year I'll show up and she'll just be happy to see me, that she'll ask about my work and actually listen, that she'll acknowledge my accomplishments, that she'll treat me like she treats Jessica, like I'm someone to be proud of instead of someone to be pitied and criticized. She's had 35 years to do that, and she hasn't. What makes you think year 36 will be different? Nothing, I guess. Hope, stupidity, the little girl inside me who still wants her mommy to love her. She does love you, in her own twisted way. She just loves the idea of who she wants you to be more than she loves who you actually are. And until she can let go of that fantasy and accept reality, these gatherings are going to keep being painful for you. So what do I do? Skip Christmas forever? Or, Nicole said, her tone shifting to something more mischievous, you could show up with someone so impressive that even your judgmental mother couldn't find fault with him. Someone so successful, so accomplished, so perfect on paper that she'd have to shut up about you being a failure. Someone who would force her to acknowledge that you're actually doing great. I'm not dating anyone. And I'm not going to find someone and start dating them just to prove a point to my mother. That's manipulative and dishonest. I'm not suggesting you fake a relationship. I'm suggesting you date someone genuinely impressive, like specifically seek out the kind of man your mother would have to approve of. A doctor, a lawyer, someone with money and status and credentials, someone she literally couldn't criticize. And then bring him to Christmas and watch her choke on her judgment. That seems petty. Your mother has been manipulating you and emotionally abusing you for years with her constant criticism and comparison. Maybe it's time you fought back with her own weapons. Find someone impressive, bring him to Christmas, and watch her have to finally admit that you're not a failure. I laughed, but the idea stuck with me. Not because I wanted revenge or to manipulate my mother, but because I was tired. So tired. Tired of being judged. Tired of being compared to Jessica. Tired of being made to feel like my life was worthless because I didn't follow the traditional path. Tired of defending my choices. Tired of arguing that my career and my independence and my full, rich life had value even without a husband and children. I wanted to walk into Christmas and have my mother see that I was successful, that I'd built a good life, that I had value and worth, and if showing up with an impressive man would accomplish that, make her finally shut up about my failures and my biological clock and my desperate single status, Maybe it was worth considering. Over the next few months, as winter turned to spring and spring to summer, I thought about Nicole's suggestion more seriously. Not constantly. I had a busy life and a demanding career and lots of other things to think about. But the idea lingered in the back of my mind. Maybe I should be more intentional about dating. Maybe I should seek out someone accomplished and impressive, not because I needed to prove anything, but because maybe dating someone my mother couldn't criticize would finally give me some peace at family gatherings. So I started being more deliberate about my dating life. I updated my profiles on dating apps and was more selective about who I swiped right on. I said yes to setups from friends. I went to professional networking events and literary, parties and industry conferences, and actually talked to interesting men instead of just focusing on work conversations. I went on probably 20 first dates between January and August. Some were fine, but there was no chemistry, like the corporate lawyer who was perfectly pleasant, but talked exclusively about his golf game. Some had chemistry, but weren't particularly accomplished, like the bartender who was funny and attractive, but worked odd hours and had no ambition beyond his current job. Some were accomplished, but turned out to be jerks, like the hedge fund manager who spent the entire dinner talking about his salary and his apartment and his car and his watch, then asked me to split the check. I was starting to think Nicole's idea was impossible. Finding someone who was both genuinely compatible with me and impressively successful enough to silence my mother seemed like finding a unicorn. Someone who checked all the boxes on paper, but also had the chemistry and personality and values that would make an actual relationship work. Then in early September, at a book launch party for one of my authors at a gallery in Chelsea, I met Dr. James Harrison, 42 years old, chief of surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital, one of the best hospitals in New York City, specializing in cardiothoracic surgery, literally performing open heart surgery, saving people's lives on a daily basis. Graduated from Harvard Medical School summa cum laude, multiple awards and recognitions in his field, published researcher with articles in major medical journals, teaching professor training the next generation of surgeons, board certified, highly respected among his peers, earning probably $500,000 a year or more. And beyond all those impressive credentials, he was also handsome in that distinguished, mature way that actually gets better with age. Salt and pepper hair that was mostly gray at the temples. Strong, intelligent features. Warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Tall, maybe 6'2", with an athletic build maintained despite the demanding schedule of a surgeon. Well-dressed in that effortless way that some men have, wearing a perfectly tailored blazer and nice jeans and leather shoes that were clearly expensive, but not ostentatious. He'd come to the book launch because the author, a writer named Margaret Chen, who'd written a thriller about medical malpractice, had interviewed James extensively for research about hospital procedures and surgical protocols. James had read an advance copy of the book and wanted to attend the launch to support Margaret's work. We ended up talking by the appetizer table, both reaching for the same bruschetta at the same moment, laughing at the near collision. He apologized, I apologized, and then somehow we just started talking. About the book first, and Margaret's research process, then about books in general. He was an avid reader despite his demanding schedule, favoring historical fiction and literary memoirs. Then about our work, him describing the challenges and rewards of cardiac surgery, me talking about the editorial process and what it's like to help shape a book from manuscript to publication. We talked for 2 hours straight, standing by that appetizer table, ignoring the rest of the party happening around us. The chemistry was immediate and natural, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. He was fascinating, smart and passionate about his work, but also funny and self-deprecating. He told a story about a surgery that went wrong due to a miscommunication that ended up being darkly hilarious in retrospect. He asked thoughtful questions about my work and actually listened to the answers, following up with more questions that showed he was genuinely interested. When the party was winding down and people were starting to leave, James asked for my number. I gave it to him without hesitation. He called the next day, not texted, actually called, which felt refreshingly old-fashioned, and asked me to dinner. Our first date was at a quiet Italian restaurant in the West Village, a neighborhood place with checked tablecloths and excellent pasta and wine. We talked for 4 hours, closing down the restaurant, the staff politely hovering with the check while we finished our second bottle of wine and kept talking. He was even more interesting over dinner than he'd been at the party. Smart, passionate, well-read, thoughtful. He asked about my family, my childhood, what had led me to publishing. He talked about growing up in Boston, deciding to become a doctor after watching surgeons save his younger sister's life when she was sick as a child. The long, grueling years of medical school and residency and fellowships. There was attraction, definite physical chemistry, but also genuine compatibility. Shared values, similar worldviews, complementary personalities. He was calm and measured where I was more emotional and reactive. I was creative and intuitive where he was analytical and precise. We balanced each other. We started dating, casually at first, dinner once a week, maybe a weekend brunch. Then more frequently as we both wanted to spend more time together. By October, we were seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week, fitting dates into his demanding hospital schedule and my deadline-driven work life. By November, we were exclusive, having had the conversation about being official and deleting our dating apps. By December, we were definitely in a serious relationship with genuine feelings and future potential. James was, objectively, extremely impressive. The kind of person my mother would have to acknowledge as successful and accomplished. Chief of surgery at a major hospital, saving lives daily, making probably $500,000 a year, respected in his field. Harvard-educated, published researcher, teaching professor, the kind of credentials that even the most judgmental mother couldn't dismiss or criticize. But more importantly, much more importantly, I actually liked him. Genuinely liked him as a person beyond his impressive resume. He was kind and thoughtful in ways that had nothing to do with his professional accomplishments. He brought me coffee in the mornings when he stayed over, remembering exactly how I liked it. He remembered details about my work and asked follow-up questions about projects I'd mentioned weeks earlier. He made me laugh with his dry sense of humor. He was supportive of my career without being threatened by it. He treated me with respect and affection and genuine care. This wasn't a performance or a manipulation. This wasn't me dating someone just to prove a point to my mother. This was a real relationship with someone I genuinely cared about, who happened to also be exactly the kind of person my mother would be forced to respect. In mid-December, about a week and a half before Christmas, James and I were having dinner at his apartment in the Upper East Side, a beautiful 2-bedroom place with views of Central Park that spoke to his success without being ostentatiously wealthy. He'd cooked for us, something he enjoyed doing when he had time, making a simple pasta dish with fresh ingredients from the farmer's market. "So," I said as we were finishing dinner, "Christmas, what are your plans?" "I'm on call at the hospital on Christmas Day, unfortunately. Someone has to be available for emergency surgeries. But Christmas Eve is free." "Why?" "My family does Christmas Eve dinner at my parents' house in Connecticut. Big family gathering, extended relatives, the whole thing. It's complicated. My mother is very judgmental and critical, especially about me being single. She's been giving me grief about it for years. Every Christmas is this ordeal where she compares me to my perfect married sister and makes me feel terrible about my life choices." James frowned, setting down his fork. "That sounds awful. I'm sorry you have to deal with that. That must be really painful, especially during what's supposed to be a happy holiday." "Yeah, it's not fun. It's actually pretty miserable if I'm being honest. But I was thinking, would you want to come with me this year? Meet my family? I know it's a lot to ask, and I know meeting the family is a big step in a relationship, but I'd love to," he said immediately, without hesitation. "Really? Even knowing my mother is going to be judging you and asking invasive questions and probably being difficult?" "Amanda, I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. I deal with life and death situations every day. I make split-second decisions that determine whether someone lives or dies. I've had to tell families that their loved one didn't survive surgery. I think I can handle your critical mother." He smiled, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Besides, I want to meet your family. You're important to me. Your family is part of your life, part of who you are. I want to be part of your life, which means meeting the people in it, even the difficult ones. So yes, I'll come to Christmas Eve dinner with you." I felt relief wash over me. Tension I hadn't realized I was holding releasing from my shoulders. "Thank you. Fair warning, my mother is going to be shocked. She spent years telling me I'm too old and too picky and I'm never going to find anyone good enough. Showing up with you is going to blow her mind. She's going to be in complete disbelief. Good, James said firmly, squeezing my hand. Maybe she needs to be shocked. Maybe she needs to see that you're successful and happy and in a relationship with someone who values you and sees your worth. I'm happy to be the agent of that shock. More than happy. You might regret this once you actually meet her. I doubt it. From everything you've told me, your mother is difficult, but not dangerous. I can handle difficult, and I want to be there to support you, because these family gatherings sound really hard for you, and I don't want you to face that alone anymore. I felt tears spring to my eyes at his kindness, at his genuine care for my well-being. Thank you. That means more than you know. So that's how we ended up here. December 24th, 2024. Christmas Eve. Driving from Manhattan to Greenwich, Connecticut, in James's car, a nice BMW that spoke of success without being ostentatious or flashy. I was nervous. More nervous than I'd been in years, possibly ever. My hands were shaking slightly as I checked my makeup in the visor mirror. I'd warned James extensively about my mother over the past week and a half, trying to prepare him for every possible scenario. What she might say, how she might react, the questions she'd ask, the criticisms she'd make, the ways she'd try to find fault, even when there was none to find. James had listened patiently to all my warnings and anxieties, and assured me repeatedly that it would be fine, that he could handle whatever my mother threw at him, that we'd get through the evening together. You need to understand, I told him for probably the 10th time as we drove through Connecticut, the winter landscape passing by outside the windows. My mother is going to be in shock. She's going to be skeptical. She's going to think this can't possibly be real, because it doesn't fit the narrative she's built about my life. She's going to ask you a million invasive questions. She's going to try to find some flaw or red flag. She's going to look for reasons why this relationship won't work, because she spent years telling me I'm too picky and too old and no one will ever be good enough. And if you're actually as great as you seem, that means she was wrong. And my mother hates being wrong. Let her try, James said calmly, his eyes on the road, one hand on the steering wheel and one hand holding mine. I'm pretty unimpeachable on paper. Harvard-educated, chief of surgery, saving lives for a living, financially stable, never been married because I was focused on my career and waiting for the right person. What's she going to criticize? That I care about you? That I have a successful career? That I'm good-looking and charming and excellent boyfriend material? He grinned at that last part, making me laugh despite my nerves. You're very confident. I'm realistic. I'm a great catch. You're a great catch. We're both successful adults in a healthy, genuine relationship. Your mother's opinion doesn't change those objective facts. And honestly, I'm actually kind of looking forward to this. I want to meet the woman who raised you, even if she's been difficult. I want to see where you came from. And I want her to see that you're valued and loved and appreciated. Because you deserve that recognition even if she hasn't given it to you. We pulled up to my parents' house at exactly 6 o'clock. I'd timed our arrival deliberately to be punctual, but not early. The house looked like a Christmas catalog, exactly as I'd expected. White lights outlining every window and doorway and roofline, a massive wreath on the front door, covered in pine cones and red ribbons, decorated trees visible through the front windows, twinkling with lights and ornaments, candles in every window, garland wrapped around the porch railing, the whole house glowing warm and inviting in the December darkness. My mother went all out for Christmas decorating every single year, spending weeks making everything look perfect for the family gathering. It was important to her that everything look magazine perfect, that guests would walk in and immediately be impressed by the beauty and elegance of her home and her holiday celebration. I could see through the windows that people were already there, shapes, moving around inside, the warm glow of lamps in the fireplace, conversations and laughter audible even from outside, the whole festive scene that I'd been part of every year of my life, but where I'd always felt like an outsider. The disappointment in the corner while everyone else celebrated. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. James reached over and squeezed my hand, solid and reassuring. You ready for this? He asked gently. Not even a little bit, but let's do it anyway. We got out of the car, the cold December air biting at my face. James grabbed the gifts from the back seat. I'd insisted on bringing nice presents for everyone. and James had agreed to include his name on the tags to make it clear we were presenting as a couple. Expensive wine for my parents, a coffee table book about gardens for my mother, a book about financial history for my father, toys for Jessica's kids that I'd carefully selected based on their ages and interests, a scented candle set for Jessica because I didn't know what else to get her. We walked up the front path together, our breath visible in the cold air. I rang the doorbell instead of just walking in because I wanted to make an entrance. Wanted my mother to open the door and see immediately that I wasn't alone this year, that everything she thought she knew about my life was about to change. The door opened. My mother stood there, wearing an elegant red dress that was probably designer, her hair perfectly styled in soft waves, her makeup flawless. She was holding a glass of white wine and smiling, ready to greet whoever had arrived, ready to play the perfect hostess. She saw me first. Her smile faltered slightly, her usual reaction to seeing me, that little flicker of disappointment before she composed herself into politeness. Then she saw James standing next to me. Her eyes widened. She looked at him, then at me, then back at him, her brain clearly trying to process what she was seeing. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked genuinely shocked, frozen in the doorway with her wine glass raised halfway to her mouth. "Amanda," she said slowly, her voice confused. "You're here, and you brought someone. You brought a man." "Merry Christmas, Mom," I said, my voice stronger and more confident than I felt. "This is Dr. James Harrison." "James, this is my mother, Catherine Sterling." James stepped forward with easy confidence, his posture relaxed, extending his hand with a warm, genuine smile. "Mrs. Sterling, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Amanda has told me so much about you and your family. Thank you for having me in your home for Christmas. I'm honored to be included in your family celebration." My mother shook his hand automatically, still looking slightly stunned, her eyes moving from James back to me as if checking to make sure I was really there, that this was really happening. "Dr. Harrison? You're a doctor? What kind of doctor?" "I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon, ma'am. Chief of surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital here in New York. I've been at Mount Sinai for about 8 years now, working my way up through the department. I specialize in complex cardiac procedures, valve replacements, coronary bypasses, heart transplants, that sort of thing." "Chief of surgery," my mother repeated slowly, processing this information, trying to fit it into her understanding of who I was and what my life looked like. "At Mount Sinai, that's very impressive. Very impressive indeed. Thank you. I feel very fortunate to do work I'm passionate about, work that makes a real difference in people's lives. It's challenging and demanding, but incredibly rewarding. I can't imagine doing anything else." He gestured to the gifts we were carrying. "We brought some things for everyone. Should we bring them inside? It's quite cold out here." "Yes, of course." Come in." She stepped back, allowing us to enter, but her eyes never left James, studying him intently like she was trying to find the catch, the flaw, the reason this couldn't possibly be real or legitimate. We stepped into the house, warm air washing over us after the cold outside. The living room was full of family members, just like last year and every year before. My father Robert standing by the fireplace in a cardigan and khakis, looking distinguished and relaxed. Jessica and Michael sitting on the couch looking like a catalog photo, Jessica in a designer dress with her blonde hair perfectly styled, Michael in a blazer and nice jeans. Their 3 children, Ryan, Emma, and Jack, playing on the floor with new toys they'd apparently already received. My Aunt Carol and Uncle Dave in the armchairs looking comfortable and festive. Various cousins and family friends scattered around the room with wine glasses and appetizer plates. Maybe 18 people total this year. Everyone turned to look as we entered, conversations pausing mid-sentence. I saw Jessica's eyes widen dramatically when she saw James next to me. Saw my father straighten up with interest and surprise. Saw Aunt Carol lean forward to get a better look, her mouth forming a small O of surprise. "Everyone," my mother announced, her voice slightly strained and higher pitched than normal. "Amanda has brought a guest. This is Dr. James Harrison. He's a surgeon, a heart surgeon, chief of surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City." She said it like she couldn't quite believe the words coming out of her own mouth, like she was reading from a script that didn't make sense. The room went quiet for a moment, everyone processing this information, trying to reconcile what they were seeing with what they thought they knew about me and my perpetually single status. Then my father broke the silence, standing and walking over with a genuinely warm smile, extending his hand to James. "Dr. Harrison, welcome to our home. I'm Robert Sterling, Amanda's father. It's a real pleasure to meet you. Chief of surgery. That's quite an accomplishment, especially at your age. How long have you been in that position?" "About 3 years now, sir. I've been at Mount Sinai for 8 years total, working my way up through the department. Started as an attending surgeon, then associate director of the cardiac surgery division, then was appointed chief of surgery 3 years ago. It's been a great place to practice and teach. We have excellent facilities and a strong team of surgeons and support staff. Teaching as well? Do you have a faculty appointment?" "Yes, sir. I'm a clinical professor at Mount Sinai's medical school. I supervise residents and fellows, teach surgical techniques, mentor young surgeons. It's one of my favorite parts of the job, actually, helping train the next generation. There's something very rewarding about passing on knowledge and watching talented young doctors develop their skills. That's wonderful. Important work. Amanda, sweetheart, you didn't mention you were seeing someone, let alone someone so accomplished. It's fairly recent." "Dad," I said, feeling strange about everyone's shocked reactions, gratified and uncomfortable all at once. "We've been dating for about 3 months. I wanted to wait until it was serious before introducing him to the family." 3 months, my mother repeated, her voice tight, finding something to criticize. "You've been dating for 3 months and this is the first we're hearing about it? You didn't think to mention you were seeing someone?" "I wanted to make sure the relationship was stable and serious before bringing him into family gatherings," I said, which was partially true. Mostly I'd wanted to avoid giving her ammunition to criticize my relationship choices or predict failure before the relationship was established enough to withstand her skepticism. Jessica finally spoke up from her position on the couch, her voice dripping with barely concealed skepticism and something that sounded like jealousy. 3 months isn't very long, though, is it? How did you two even meet? Amanda, you're usually so busy with work." Before I could answer, James responded smoothly, turning to address Jessica directly with a friendly smile. "At a book launch party, actually. One of Amanda's authors, Margaret Chen, was writing a medical thriller and had interviewed me extensively for research about hospital procedures and surgical protocols. I'd read an advance copy of the book and wanted to attend the launch to support her work. Amanda and I ended up talking by the appetizer table all evening. I was impressed by her intelligence and passion for her work. I asked for her number at the end of the night, called her the next day, and we went to dinner. We've been together ever since." "How romantic," Jessica said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. "And you're really a surgeon? Like, you actually operate on people? Open heart surgery?" James smiled patiently, clearly picking up on the skepticism in her voice. "Yes, I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. I specialize in complex cardiac procedures, valve replacements, coronary bypasses, aortic repairs, sometimes heart transplants when an appropriate donor becomes available. It's challenging work but incredibly rewarding when you can save someone's life or improve their quality of life significantly." "He saves lives," I added, unable to keep the note of pride out of my voice. "James literally saves people's lives every single day. Children, parents, grandparents, people who would die without his skills and expertise." "That must be very stressful," my mother said, and I could hear her brain working overtime, trying to find the angle that would let her criticize this situation. "Do you work long hours? Surgeons work terrible schedules, don't they? That must be very hard on a relationship, especially when Amanda is so focused on her career too. I can't imagine 2 workaholics would have much time for each other. When would you even see each other?" "We make time for what's important," James said easily, his tone pleasant but firm. "Yes, we both have demanding careers. I work long hours at the hospital. Amanda has deadlines and evening events for work. But we respect each other's professional commitments and support each other's ambitions. We have dinner together several times a week. We spend weekends together when I'm not on call. We text throughout the day when we're busy. I actually think having 2 driven, ambitious people makes the relationship stronger. We understand each other's dedication to our professions. We don't resent each other's work because we both value meaningful careers." My mother's lips thinned, pressed together in a tight line. She didn't like that answer. She'd wanted him to say the demanding careers were a problem, wanted confirmation that my focus on work was detrimental to relationships, wanted evidence that this wouldn't work out. She wasn't getting it. "Well," she said finally, her voice clipped, "let me get you both drinks. What would you like? We have wine, champagne, cocktails, beer." "I'd love a glass of red wine if you have it," James said politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling. Same for me." "Mom," I added. "Fine. I'll be right back." She hurried off toward the kitchen, clearly needing a moment to process what was happening, to recalibrate her understanding of the situation. As she left, the rest of the family converged on us, curiosity overcoming their initial shock. My father was asking James more detailed questions about his work, genuinely interested in the medical field and surgical specialties. Aunt Carol was asking how we met, wanting all the romantic details. Jessica's husband, Michael, was making polite conversation about living in New York and the challenges of city life versus suburban life. Jessica herself hung back slightly, watching from the couch with barely concealed irritation on her face. She was used to being the star of family gatherings, the daughter who'd done everything right, the one whose life was held up as the model everyone else should follow. My showing up with someone as objectively impressive as James, someone whose credentials and accomplishments outshone even Michael's successful finance career, was disrupting that familiar narrative. She didn't like it. The evening progressed, moving through cocktails into dinner. My mother returned from the kitchen with our wine, handing us the glasses with a tight smile, still looking like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. The family mingled, asking James questions, welcoming him warmly because everyone could recognize that he was impressive and accomplished. Eventually, my mother announced that dinner was ready and we moved into the dining room. The table was set beautifully, as always. My grandmother's china, crystal glasses that caught the candlelight, silver serving pieces polished until they gleamed. The food was elaborate as always, my mother having spent days preparing. Roasted beef tenderloin as the centerpiece, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon, glazed carrots, fresh Parker House rolls, an elaborate winter salad with pomegranate seeds and candied pecans. Everything looked perfect, like something from a food magazine. My mother had seated James next to her at the table, a position of honor usually reserved for the most important or prestigious guest. I was seated on James's other side, with my father at the head of the table, Jessica across from me looking increasingly annoyed. Throughout dinner, my mother peppered James with questions, trying to get to know him but also clearly trying to find some flaw or red flag that would confirm her preconceptions. "So, Dr. Harrison, please, Mrs. Sterling. Call me James. James, you said you're 42 years old?" "That's correct." "And you've never been married?" "At 42? No children." Here it was. The question designed to find the flaw, the problem, the reason why someone so successful and accomplished was still single at 42. There must be something wrong with him. Commitment issues, secret problems, character flaws. James answered calmly, clearly having anticipated this question. "I was engaged once actually back in my early 30s, to another doctor we'd met during my residency. We were both extremely focused on our careers, working 80 to 100 hours a week, barely seeing each other. We got engaged thinking that would solve things, that we'd make more time once we were committed. But ultimately we realized we weren't actually compatible as life partners. We wanted different things. She wanted to move back to California to be near her family. I wanted to stay in New York where I'd built my career. She wanted children immediately. I wasn't ready for that. We ended things amicably after about a year of being engaged. It was the right decision for both of us. And since then, my mother pressed. That was 10 years ago? You've been single for 10 years? Not single continuously, no. I've dated. I've had relationships, but nothing that felt right for the long term. I didn't want to settle or rush into something just to check a box or because I felt pressure to be married by a certain age. I wanted to find someone I genuinely connected with, someone who shared my values, someone I could build a life with. I was willing to wait for the right person rather than forcing something that wasn't right. "And you think Amanda is that person?" my mother asked, her tone skeptical, almost challenging. "After only 3 months? That seems very fast." "I think Amanda is extraordinary," James said, and the genuine warmth in his voice made my throat tighten with emotion. He turned to look at me, his expression open and honest. "She's intelligent, accomplished, passionate about her work, kind, funny, interesting to talk to. She has deep thoughts about books and art and life. She cares about making a difference through her work. She's built an impressive career in a competitive field. Every day I'm with her, I discover new things I admire about her. Every conversation we have makes me more certain that I want to keep having conversations with her. 3 months might seem short to some people, but when you meet the right person, you know." "I know," I felt tears prick my eyes. This wasn't a performance for my mother's benefit. This was real. James genuinely felt this way about me. He saw my worth, my value, everything I'd been trying to get my mother to see for years. My mother looked like she'd bitten into something unexpectedly sour. She'd expected, maybe even hoped for, some red flag, some indication that this relationship was flawed or wouldn't last. Instead, she got a completely reasonable explanation for his relationship history and a genuinely romantic declaration of his feelings for me. "Well," she said tightly, taking a long sip of her wine, "that's very sweet of you to say. Amanda is she's accomplished in her career, yes, though of course career isn't everything in life. Career alone doesn't make a person complete or fulfilled. Jessica understood that having a family is what really matters in life, what gives life true meaning." "With respect, Mrs. Sterling," James interrupted gently but firmly, his tone polite but clearly disagreeing. "I have to respectfully disagree with that perspective. I think what matters in life is living authentically and building a life that brings you genuine fulfillment and satisfaction, whatever that looks like for each individual person. For some people, that absolutely includes marriage and children and a traditional family structure. For others, it's career and creative pursuits and other kinds of meaningful work. For still others, it's some combination or something entirely different. Amanda has built an impressive career doing work she genuinely loves. She's shaped literature that millions of people read and enjoy. She's helped authors achieve their dreams of publication. She makes a real difference in the literary world. That's incredibly meaningful work that has value and impact." My father spoke up unexpectedly from the end of the table, his voice firm. "James is absolutely right, Catherine. Amanda has done very well for herself. She's successful and independent and doing work that matters. We should be proud of what she's accomplished, not dismissing it because it doesn't look exactly like what we expected or what Jessica chose." I looked at my father in surprise. He'd never defended me against my mother's criticism before. He'd always stayed silent, avoiding conflict, letting my mother say whatever she wanted without pushback. This was new. This was different. My mother's face flushed, clearly unhappy at being contradicted by both James and my father in front of the entire family. "Of course I'm proud of Amanda," she said stiffly, defensively. "I've always been proud of both my daughters. I simply think there are different kinds of success in life. Jessica's success with her family, her husband, her children, her beautiful home, is just as valuable and important as Amanda's career success. I'm simply saying that career alone isn't enough for a complete life. And I'm saying that different people find fulfillment in different ways," James replied calmly, not backing down. "Both paths are equally valid. Neither is better or worse than the other. They're just different, and that's okay. Amanda shouldn't be criticized or made to feel inadequate because her life looks different from Jessica's life. They're different people with different values and priorities, and both are living authentic lives that work for them." The conversation moved on after that, my mother clearly uncomfortable with the direction it had taken. But the point had been made. James had defended me, publicly and firmly, in front of my entire family. He'd contradicted my mother's fundamental worldview and sided with me. Nobody had ever done that before. The rest of dinner passed with lighter conversation, discussion of the food, questions about James's most interesting surgeries, stories about funny things Jessica's kids had said recently, holiday plans. My mother was quieter than usual, clearly processing everything, clearly uncomfortable with how the evening was unfolding. After dinner, we moved back to the living room for dessert and gift exchange. My mother had made her usual elaborate spread, 3 kinds of pie, homemade cookies, a Yule log cake that had taken her 2 days to make. Everything was beautifully presented on cake stands and decorative plates. This was usually my least favorite part of Christmas Eve, watching my mother fawn over Jessica's children as they opened their gifts, seeing the expensive presents Jessica and Michael received from my parents while mine were always more modest, feeling the differential treatment play out in real time with witnesses. But this year felt different. When it came time to open presents, I watched my mother unwrap the gift from Amanda and James. A beautiful cream-colored cashmere shawl from a luxury boutique in Manhattan. Far nicer and more expensive than what I'd usually buy. James had insisted on contributing significantly to all the gifts, wanting to make a good impression. "This is lovely," my mother said, running her hands over the impossibly soft fabric, her fingers tracing the delicate weave. "Very luxurious, very generous. Thank you both." She said it grudgingly, like the words hurt coming out, like she was being forced to acknowledge something she didn't want to acknowledge. She hated having to thank me for something genuinely nice and expensive. Hated that I was here with an impressive boyfriend who was making her look petty and wrong. Hated that the narrative she'd built about my life, the disappointing single daughter who would end up alone, was being proven false in front of everyone. Jessica received her gifts with similar reluctance, clearly unhappy at no longer being the undisputed star of the family gathering. Her children were oblivious to the adult dynamics, excited about their new toys and games. But Jessica kept shooting me looks throughout the gift exchange. Looks that said she was deeply unhappy about this shift in family dynamics, about me no longer being the failure she could feel superior to. Around 10 o'clock, as the party was winding down and people were starting to make motions toward leaving, gathering their coats and saying their goodbyes, my mother cornered me in the kitchen while I was helping clean up. James was in the living room talking to my father and uncle about hospital administration and healthcare policy. "Can we talk?" my mother asked, her voice tight and strained. "Privately?" "Sure, Mom." She looked at me for a long moment, her expression complicated. Confusion, discomfort, something that might have been shame. "Is this real? You and James? This relationship?" "Yes, it's real." "Why would you think it's not? It just seems very convenient, doesn't it? After years of you showing up here alone, after years of me expressing legitimate concern about your perpetual single status, suddenly you show up with someone absolutely perfect. A doctor, a surgeon, chief of surgery, Harvard-educated, handsome, successful, charming, saying all the right things. It feels too perfect, too convenient, like you planned this specifically to prove something to me." I felt anger rise hot in my chest, my hands clenching into fists. "You're literally questioning whether my relationship is real because my boyfriend is too impressive? Do you hear how insane that sounds? I'm just saying the timing is suspicious. It feels calculated. I met someone I genuinely care about who happens to also be very accomplished and successful. I'm sorry if that's inconvenient for the narrative you've built about me being a failure who can't find anyone. I never said you were a failure. You've said it 100 times. 1,000 times. Not in those exact words, maybe, but the message has been crystal clear. Every Christmas, every family gathering, every phone call, you've made it painfully obvious that you think my life is worthless because I'm not married with children like Jessica. You've mocked me and compared me and made me feel inadequate for years, decades. I was concerned about you, worried about your future. No, you were judgmental and cruel. There's a difference, Mom. Concern looks like asking if I'm happy and accepting my answer. Judgment looks like telling me my life is empty and meaningless because it doesn't match your expectations. You didn't express concern. You expressed disappointment and disdain. My mother's face flushed red. "That's not fair, Amanda. I'm your mother. I want what's best for you." "No. You want what you think is best based on your own limited worldview. You want me to live the life you lived, make the choices you made, value the things you value. But I'm not you, Mom. I never was. I never will be. And my version of a good life doesn't have to look like yours." She was quiet for a long moment, looking down at the dish towel in her hands, twisting it between her fingers. Then quietly, "I just wanted you to have what I have. A family, a husband, children, someone to take care of you. That's what made my life meaningful. And that's wonderful, that those things gave your life meaning. But they're not the only sources of meaning. I don't need someone to take care of me. I take care of myself just fine." And my version of happiness, my version of a meaningful life, doesn't have to include a husband and children. It includes my career that I love, my friends who matter to me, my apartment that I've made into a home, the books I help bring into the world, the authors whose dreams I help fulfill, the life I've built on my own terms. But you're alone. I'm not alone. I have friends, I have family, I have a relationship now with someone wonderful. And even when I was single, I wasn't alone. Being single doesn't mean being lonely or incomplete or less than. Some of the happiest, most fulfilled people I know are single. You need to let go of this idea that marriage and children are the only path to a meaningful, complete life. That's not true for everyone. She was quiet again, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't realize I was hurting you so badly. I thought I was helping, pushing you toward happiness. You knew, I said firmly. Don't pretend you didn't know. You saw my face every time you made those comments. You heard the pain in my voice when I tried to defend my choices. You knew those things hurt. You just didn't care enough to stop because you were more concerned with pushing your agenda than with my actual feelings and well-being. I didn't mean... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, unable to deny what we both knew was true. Is there any chance you can forgive me? She asked quietly after a long pause. That we can repair this relationship? I looked at this woman who'd been my mother for 36 years, who'd given me life but had spent decades making me feel like my life wasn't valuable, who'd provided materially but starved me emotionally, who'd shown me what kind of mother I never wanted to be. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe eventually, if things genuinely change. But not now, not yet. Right now I need space. I need to focus on my own life, my own happiness, my own chosen family. The family I've built with friends who actually value me. The relationship I'm building with James who actually sees my worth. I need that right now. Can I at least stay in touch? Can I call you sometimes? You can call. I may not always answer, but you can call. But Mom, if you call just to criticize me, or compare me to Jessica, or tell me what I should be doing differently with my life, I'm going to hang up. Those days are over. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be one based on acceptance and respect, not judgment and criticism. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face now, mascara running in black tracks. You're right. I know you're right. It's hard for me to understand a life so different from mine. Marriage and motherhood gave me purpose and identity and meaning. I genuinely can't imagine my life without those things. But I understand that you're different, that your path is different, and I need to accept that instead of trying to force you into my mold. Thank you. That's all I'm asking for. Understanding and acceptance of who I actually am, instead of disappointment that I'm not who you wanted me to be. We stood in silence for a moment, the sound of laughter and conversation drifting in from the living room. Then she said, "He seems very nice, James, and he clearly cares about you very deeply." He is nice. And yes, he does care about me. I care about him too. This is real, Mom. This is me being genuinely happy in a relationship with someone wonderful who values me for who I actually am. I'm glad, truly. I'm glad you found someone. He seems like a very good man. He is. I'm sorry for the years of comments and judgment and criticism. You're right. I was pushing my own values and expectations onto you without considering what you actually wanted for your life, what would actually make you happy. That was wrong. I was wrong. Thank you for saying that. That actually means a lot. James appeared in the kitchen doorway, picking up on the emotional atmosphere, his expression concerned. Everything okay in here? Your dad was asking if we wanted more coffee before we head back to the city. We're fine, I said, looking at my mother to confirm. Just having an overdue conversation. A good conversation, actually. Actually, James, my mother said, her voice still thick with emotion. Before you both leave, I wanted to thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being so gracious with all our questions and curiosity. And thank you for what you said at dinner, about Amanda's accomplishments, about different paths being equally valid. I needed to hear that. From someone outside the family. I've been too rigid in my thinking about what success looks like, what a good life looks like. You helped me see that. James smiled warmly. No hint of judgment or superiority despite having just witnessed a family drama. Mrs. Sterling, Amanda is one of the most impressive, accomplished, interesting people I've ever met in my life. You should be incredibly proud of what she's built and who she is. I know I'm proud to be with her. I am proud, my mother said, and this time it sounded genuine rather than defensive. I haven't always shown it well or expressed it clearly, but I am proud of Amanda. I need to do better at showing that. We left my parents' house around 11, saying goodbye to everyone, enduring hugs and well wishes and requests to come back soon. Jessica barely spoke to me as we left, clearly still processing this shift in family dynamics. My father hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm proud of you," in my ear, which made me tear up again. We drove back toward Manhattan in comfortable silence, James's hand holding mine across the center console. The highway was relatively empty, most people already home for the holiday. Christmas lights twinkled from houses as we passed through towns and suburbs. After about 20 minutes, James spoke. "That went well, I think. Intense, but well. Your mother seems to have had some kind of revelation or breakthrough." She apologized. I don't think she's ever apologized to me before in my entire life. Like, genuinely acknowledged she was wrong and said sorry. That's new. That's significant. Good. You deserved that apology. You deserved many apologies, actually, for years of hurtful behavior. But it's a start. Thank you for coming with me tonight. Thank you for defending me at dinner, for contradicting my mother when she dismissed my career. You didn't have to do that. Nobody's ever done that before. Yes, I did have to. Amanda, you're extraordinary. Your life is valuable and meaningful. Your work matters. Your accomplishments deserve to be celebrated and respected. Your mother needed to hear that from someone she couldn't dismiss. She could dismiss your own self-advocacy as defensive or biased, but she couldn't dismiss me, an accomplished professional from outside the family with no agenda except honestly assessing your worth. So yes, I absolutely had to say something. I felt tears spring to my eyes again. This is real, right? This relationship? It's not just me bringing an impressive boyfriend to prove a point to my mother. It's real, James said firmly, squeezing my hand. It's absolutely real. Amanda, I'm with you because I love spending time with you, because you're smart and funny and kind and fascinating, because you challenge me intellectually, because you make me laugh, because you make me want to be a better person, because conversations with you are the best part of my day. The impressive credentials and professional success are just bonuses. I'd be with you even if it meant dealing with a difficult mother every single Christmas for the rest of my life. Did you just say, for the rest of my life? He glanced over at me with a small smile. I did. Too soon? No, not too soon. Perfect timing, actually. Good, because I'm in this, Amanda. I'm all in. 3 months might seem early to know, but I know. You're it for me. You're it for me, too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. This whole thing, meeting you, dating you, bringing you to Christmas, it started partly because I wanted to prove something to my mother. I wanted to show her I wasn't a failure, but it became so much more than that. You became real to me. This relationship is the best thing that's happened to me in years. Maybe ever. Same here. Best thing to happen to me ever, actually. So where do we go from here? Forward, James said simply. We keep building this relationship. We keep getting to know each other. We keep supporting each other. We see where it goes. No rush. No pressure. No expectations. Except that we're honest with each other and committed to making this work. That sounds perfect. We drove the rest of the way to Manhattan, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Lighter than I'd felt through decades of Christmas gatherings where I was made to feel insufficient and disappointing. I'd walked into my mother's house with someone she couldn't belittle, someone so accomplished and impressive that even her constant criticism had to fall silent. But more than that, I'd walked in with someone who genuinely valued me, who saw my worth, who defended me when my own family wouldn't. And maybe most importantly, I'd finally stood up for myself. I'd finally told my mother how her comments had hurt me, how her constant comparisons and judgment had damaged our relationship. I'd finally set boundaries about what I would and wouldn't accept going forward. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up in my apartment to a text from my mother. Thank you for coming last night. And thank you for being patient with me while I work through some hard realizations about how I've treated you. I have a lot to think about, and a lot to change. I love you, and I'm genuinely proud of you and the life you've built. Mom. I showed the text to James, who'd stayed over and was making coffee in my kitchen. comfortable and at home in my space already. That's real progress, he said. Yeah, it is. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jessica. Can we talk? I owe you an apology too. I stared at the text in complete surprise. Jessica never apologized for anything. Ever. She was the golden child who could do no wrong, who'd never had to examine her behavior or take responsibility for how she treated people, who'd spent our entire lives being told she was perfect. I called her back, curious and cautious. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said, her voice subdued, lacking her usual confidence. Thanks for calling me back. What's this about, Jess? I wanted to apologize. For last night and for basically our entire relationship. For all the years I've been complicit in how Mom treated you. I've watched her criticize you and compare us for years, decades really. And I never stood up for you. I never told her to stop. I actually enjoyed it because it made me feel superior. Made me feel like the successful one. The one who'd gotten life right. That was wrong. You're my sister and I should have defended you. I should have stood up for you. I should have told Mom her behavior was cruel and inappropriate. I was so shocked I didn't know what to say for a moment. Jessica, let me finish, please. Watching you last night with James, seeing how confident you were, seeing how he defended you when our own family wouldn't, it made me realize how awful we've been to you. You've built this amazing life in New York. You have a career you love, work that matters, independence, freedom. You're genuinely happy. And Mom and I have spent years making you feel like that wasn't enough. Like you were failing at life because you weren't married with kids like me. That was cruel. That was unfair. That was wrong. I appreciate you saying that, Jess. That means a lot. I'm genuinely sorry. You didn't deserve how we treated you. And your boyfriend is right. Different kinds of success are equally valid. Different life paths are equally worthwhile. I've been just as narrow-minded as Mom, judging you by standards that don't even apply to your life. I'm sorry. Thank you for apologizing. I forgive you. And for what it's worth, I'm not trying to diminish your life or suggest that what you've chosen isn't valid. Marriage and kids and suburban life work for you, and that's great. I just want the same respect for my different choices. You deserve that respect. You've always deserved it. Are you happy, Amanda? Really, truly happy with your life? Yes, I really am. My life isn't perfect. Nobody's is. But it's mine and I love it. I love my work. I love where I live. I love my friends. And now I love James too. I'm happy, Jess. Genuinely happy. Good. That's what matters. That's what should have always mattered. And James seems really great, by the way. Mom couldn't stop talking about him after you left. She was in complete shock that you showed up with someone so accomplished. It was kind of hilarious, actually. I laughed despite myself. I bet. She spent years telling me no one would ever want me. And then you show up with a literal brain surgeon who obviously adores you. The look on her face was priceless. We talked for a few more minutes. The most genuine conversation Jessica and I had had since we were children. When I hung up, James was watching me with a smile. Sounds like you had quite an impact on your family last night. Apparently. Who knew that standing up for myself and bringing home an impressive boyfriend would be so effective at forcing people to reconsider their assumptions? You didn't need an impressive boyfriend to make your life valuable. You already had a valuable, meaningful, successful life. But I'm glad I could help you show your family what they've been refusing to see for years. You know what the funny thing is? I said, settling onto the couch next to him with my coffee. I thought this whole thing was about proving something to my mother. About showing her I wasn't a failure. But it actually taught me something more important. I don't need her validation. I don't need anyone's validation. I already knew my life was good. I just needed to stop seeking approval from someone who was determined not to give it. That's significant growth, James said, putting his arm around me and pulling me close. That's you finally valuing yourself the way you deserve to be valued. And finding you was a bonus. Just a bonus? I'm deeply wounded. I laughed and kissed him. Fine. Finding you was the best part. The catalyst that helped me see my own worth. Happy? Very. Epilogue, 3 months later, in March. James and I moved in together, combining households. His Upper East Side apartment or my West Village apartment. We ultimately chose mine for the location and charm. My mother's response when I told her was surprisingly positive. That's wonderful, dear. I'm truly happy for you both. James is a good man. No questions about marriage timelines. No comments about my age or biological clock. No comparisons to Jessica. Just genuine happiness for my happiness. It turned out that walking into Christmas with someone my mother couldn't belittle had accomplished more than I'd expected. It hadn't just silenced her criticism for one evening. It had fundamentally shifted how she saw me and my life. It had forced her to confront her own narrow definitions of success and value. It had made her realize that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about what constitutes a meaningful life. But more importantly, it had helped me stop seeking her approval. I'd spent 36 years trying to earn validation from someone who was withholding it for arbitrary reasons based on her own limited worldview. Standing up for myself, setting clear boundaries, and unapologetically embracing my own path had freed me from that exhausting, futile cycle. James and I got engaged a year and a half after that first Christmas together. We got married 2 years after in a small ceremony that was beautiful and meaningful and entirely on our own terms. We decided not to have children, a decision that was ours to make, based on what we wanted for our lives, and one my mother accepted without criticism or complaint. I look back now at that Christmas Eve in 2024, walking into my parents' house with James at my side, and I see it as the turning point. Not just in my relationship with my mother, but in my relationship with myself. The moment I stopped accepting other people's definitions of my worth. The moment I stood up for myself and my choices. The moment I stopped seeking approval I was never going to get on their terms and started living authentically on my own terms. My mother spent years mocking my single life, making me feel inadequate, holding up Jessica's traditional path as the only acceptable route to happiness and fulfillment. And then I walked in with someone she could never belittle, not because his credentials silenced her judgment, but because his presence and his support gave me the confidence to finally reject her judgment entirely. James was impressive, yes, but the real revelation that Christmas wasn't that I could find an accomplished partner. It was that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My life was already valuable, already meaningful, already successful, with or without a relationship, with or without meeting anyone else's expectations. Walking in with James that Christmas was the catalyst, but the real change was internal. I stopped being the daughter who desperately sought approval and became the woman who knew her own worth regardless of whether others recognized it. And that fundamental shift in how I saw myself and my life was worth infinitely more than any amount of maternal approval could ever be.